The entire village is in the pub drunk, an irate East German Communist Party official reported to Berlin. In the summer of 1953, a tidal wave of worker protests erupted across the new socialist republic, and tens of thousands of citizens stormed government offices, freed political prisoners from jail, and beat up party functionaries. Finally, tanks were ordered in to confront protesters in East Berlin. Elsewhere, soldiers opened fire on unarmed crowds. Many were killed and thousands imprisoned. In a secret report, the General Staff of the Soviet Army reported, I quote, "The provocation was prepared in advance, organized and directed from western sectors of Berlin." Few believed that, even inside the top Soviet leadership. Last week, though, declassified documents emerged proving that the Central Intelligence Agency funded anti-Soviet activists from at least 1949. The Fighting League Against Inhumanity, one of the key actors in the 1953 German uprising, was, and this is what the document says, subsidized and guided by the CIA. Even the highly respected International Commission of Jurists traces its origins to the International Committee of Free Jurists in Berlin, which its financiers at the CIA called Project Cadroit. To those schooled in the CIA's sordid history, the idea of a malign power plotting regime change will be no surprise. Foreign hands, Indian politicians have long warned, are ceaseless in their efforts to molest the motherland. There's a part of the story, though, that's less well known. Even as Indian governments have warned of the peril from the foreign hand, they've actually been warmly shaking hands with it for quite a while now. Earlier this week, India's Central Bureau of Investigation, or CBI, fired fresh shots in the long-running government campaign against foreign aid donors, this time naming the Omidyar Foundation, which has provided funding to institutions like Ashoka University and the Centre for Policy Research. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has earlier said that foreign-funded NGOs have been hatching conspiracies against him. Foreign-funded campaigns, the Intelligence Bureau claimed in 2014, were knocking up to 3% of India's GDP, a pretty astounding amount. True or otherwise, Indian Prime Ministers have shown rare agreement on this foreign hand issue. As early as 1955, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru accused the United States of, quote, buying up newspapers and spreading a network of publicity organizations. Then, Indira Gandhi, as Prime Minister, assailed foreign powers she said were plotting to run down India. CIA agents, American intelligence officer Russell Jack Smith later wrote, were to be found, according to Madam Gandhi, beneath every charpai and behind every neem tree. Even Manmohan Singh, arguably the most globalist of Indian prime ministers, had suspicions about the funding of NGO campaigns against the Kudankulam nuclear reactor. Left in a tragicomic state of helplessness by the large-scale removal of personal and sensitive information by the foreign colonial masters, India's intelligence services consisted at independence of the office furniture, empty racks and cupboards, and a few innocuous files dealing with office routine. Britain's security service, popularly known as MI5, soon began providing assistance. India became debilitatingly reliant on this relationship, the scholar Avinash Paliwal has recorded. This is satisfactory, an MI5 memo from the time smugly noted. In the summer of 1949, T.G. Sanjeevi, the first head of the Intelligence Bureau, travelled to the United States to explore setting up an alternate relationship with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI. The visit was well timed. India was battling an insurgency against communists in Telangana, and the IB hoped to secure counterintelligence expertise. Yet, the scholar of the India-United States relationship, Paul McGarr, has recorded, the meeting was a total disaster. Irked by the notoriously racist FBI Director Edgar J. Hoover, Sanjeevi let it be known that he would oppose any relationship being formed with the FBI. Even though an FBI-IB relationship did not form though, the CIA stepped in. B. N. Malik, Sanjeevi's successor, chose to turn a blind eye as the CIA ran secret flights supplying insurgents in Tibet. Exactly how much Prime Minister Nehru knew or wanted to know about this relationship remains unclear. According to the scholar Christopher Andrews, Malik kept much of the liaison with MI5 and the CIA out of Nehru's view, fearing the Prime Minister would shut it down. Historian John Garver has noted, though, that whatever the extent of the Indian complicity with US covert operations, Beijing believed that Nehru knew of and cooperated with CIA efforts. That in part laid the foundation for the War of 1962. Following the 1962 war, the relationship came into plain sight, or whatever the equivalent of plain sight is in the dark world of spies. Espionage units operated by the CIA-trained Special Frontier Force were run out of a joint India-United States control room in New Delhi, while nuclear-powered surveillance equipment was planted in the Himalayas to gather data on China's nuclear test facility at Lop Nur. No evidence exists that the CIA ever sought regime change in India. Instead, there are disturbing suggestions of the opposite, that it plotted to prop up the government. In 1959, McGarr writes, the CIA helped bring down the elected Communist Party of India government in Kerala. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, another United States ambassador to India, wrote that the CIA funded Congress Party campaigns against the left in West Bengal and Kerala. In one instance, he alleged, cash was directly handed to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. In 1967, similarly, the KGB ran a steady stream of forged letters intended to smear Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's opponents as CIA stooges, an interference in domestic policy that interestingly invited no retribution from India's government. Oleg Kalugin, who led the KGB's first directorate, that was the KGB unit responsible for disinformation, claimed both superpower intelligence services had deeply compromised the government. The entire country was seemingly for sale, Kalugin wrote in his memoirs. After a while, neither side trusted sensitive information to the Indians, realizing their enemy would know all about it the next day. Following the breakdown of the India-United States relationship in the build-up to the War of 1971, the anti-CIA polemic grew more hysterical. There was, however, not a little daylight between public denunciations and covert intelligence arrangements. In 1974, Ambassador Moynihan claims to have been presented with demands for the expulsion of United States diplomats arrested on espionage charges. At exactly the same time, he writes, RAW Chief R.N. Kao lobbied for a visit by CIA Chief William Colby. The training Indians had received in the United States was of such quality, Moynihan quoted Kao as telling him, the director of the CIA would be so welcome. The US sometimes protested against what it saw as the hypocrisy of India's posture. In one letter to Kao, CIA Chief George Bush, who later became President of the United States, grumbled about, and I quote, statements by government officials linking CIA operations with occurrences in Amritsar which are completely contrary to the fact and quite distressing. India, you see, repeatedly complained that the United States and the CIA were propping up the Khalistan movement when nothing like that actually emerged in the archive. For the most part, political leaders have responded cautiously even when actual CIA plots have been detected, seeking to insulate the wider relationship with America from damage. In 2004, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government played down the defection of RAW officer Rabinder Singh, ensuring it did not damage a hard-won rapprochement with the United States. 2 years later, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh responded in exactly the same way to revelations of the CIA's penetration of the National Security Council. Little, I'm guessing, has changed in the decades since, although the archives, of course, aren't quite so open. For all the polemic about Western toolkits and Western conspiracies, India and the United States work closely on counterterrorism and regional security. There are even efforts underway to bring India into an expanded Five Eyes Global Intelligence Alliance, the world's largest intelligence sharing system. In spite of his dark suggestions about foreign-funded destabilization plots, Prime Minister Modi's years in office have seen the relationship between RAW and the CIA steadily deepen. So is the CIA spying on India? Well, yes, that's its job. Does it seek to influence decision making and public opinion in India? That's its job. Are Indian leaders worried? That's their job. But they're probably somewhat less anxious than their public speeches and commentary might lead us to imagine. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm National Security Editor of ThePrint.